Hello, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we are learning how to guard our minds against all of the various attacks and manipulations that are present in today's world, specifically with respect to the media. Lately, we've been doing a deep dive on some offshoots of the mainstream media in an effort to address how we got to where we are today. The topic of discussion over the last several videos has been think tanks. We got into a specific think tank last week. So tonight we will continue with that topic of discussion. When we last met, we began to examine one particular think tank that holds an extraordinary amount of power and influence in today's world. That is the Council on Foreign Relations. In this video, we will look a little closer at some of the men who were present for the formation of the CFR, as well as some of the financial backing that has armed this group with the power and influence it has gained. We will also take a look at an underpinning philosophy that is pervasive around and in and amongst the powerful individuals who have exerted so much control and influence over the last century or so. So stick around to the end, and let's see what we can uncover within the inner workings of one of the world's most powerful think tanks. Founded in 1921, the CFR was initially formed in order to address concerns that had arisen in the aftermath of World War I. Near the war's end in 1918, a group of roughly 150 scholars, collectively known as the Inquiry, was tasked with briefing President Woodrow Wilson about options for the post-war world when Germany was defeated. The group produced over 2,000 documents detailing and analyzing the political, economic, and social facts that existed globally in an effort to aid Wilson in the peace talks that were to come. With their research in hand and a plan outlined, the scholars traveled to France to attend and participate in the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. As a result of the discussions at the Peace Conference, a small group of British and American diplomats and scholars met on May 30th, 1919 at the Hotel Majestic in Paris. They decided to create an Anglo-American organization called the Institute of International Affairs, which would have offices in London and New York. Ultimately, the British and American delegates formed separate institutions, with the British developing the Royal Institute of International Affairs, known as Chatham House, in London. Now, as we discussed in the last video, due to the isolationist views prevalent in American society at the time, the scholars had great difficulty gaining traction with their plan, and they turned their focus instead to a set of discrete meetings, which had been taking place since June of 1918 in New York City under the name Council on Foreign Relations. The meetings were headed by corporate lawyer Elihu Root, who had served as Secretary of State under President Theodore Roosevelt, and it was attended by 108 high-ranking officers of banking, manufacturing, trading, and finance companies, together with many lawyers. The scholars from the Inquiry saw an opportunity to create an organization that brought diplomats, high-level government officials, and academics together with lawyers, bankers, and industrialists to engineer government policy. On July 29, 1921, they filed a certification of incorporation, officially forming the Council on Foreign Relations. Founding members included its first honorary president, Elihu Root, the private lawyer for the Carnegie Corporation of New York, its first elected president, John W. Davis, a major figure in politics and law at the time, Vice President Paul D. Cravath, an early adopter of globalism and a corporate lawyer, and Secretary-Treasurer Edwin F. Gay, who was Dean of the Harvard Business School. Now, there are a few things that need to be recognized within this progression of events. First is that the men placed in charge of formulating and then implementing the foreign policy decisions of the United States were all unelected officials. These captains of industry, captains of finance, and also bureaucracy, instead of being chosen by the people to have the responsibility they did, these men were given appointments to positions of authority based on their relationships to the men who actually did hold offices with some inherent accountability. Now, that is a major problem and one that continues into today. And what we see here is what's commonly understood as a public-private partnership. While there's no singular private enterprise at work within the CFR, it has within its makeup a blurred boundary distinction between the private financial and industrial interests which form its membership and the public offices and legislating or ruling bodies which implement the desires of the group at a governmental level and thereby affecting all of the population of the country and, really because of the level of power present at the CFR, the entire world. It is within this kind of relationship where we may begin to understand the true nature of the conspiracy to control the population, the attack on our minds and our thoughts. When a public-private partnership is allowed to operate unchecked by the accountability of elected office, the individuals who occupy the offices and boardrooms of the companies share common goals and interests with the people in the various governments under their influence. In this situation, there doesn't need to be the kind of backroom, clandestine, secretive conspiracy coalition that is commonly maligned as crazy thinking and used as a way to discredit those who are skeptical of the powerful. All that is needed is a consistent ideology to permeate throughout the various individuals or groups who are calling the shots. The converging interests within the international bankers, big pharma, big oil, big tech, and the mainstream media, along with the men and women who hold elected positions of power, create the environment where freedom of choice and liberty to live how any individual sees fit comes under brutal and constant attack. It is this type of centralization of power and influence, melded with the shared interest of the powerful to maintain their power, which qualifies as the conspiracy to control our minds. When the CFR was formed, then President Woodrow Wilson was a prominent proponent of what is known as a progressive political ideology. This means he and others who thought like him were interested in changing the status quo in favor of new and innovative ideas that would spur on the progress of prosperity, justice, equity, and societal growth among the widest spectrum of the population. Now, on paper, this philosophy is quite a noble and moral one. If systems operate in ways that cause harm to people such that their freedoms and liberties are in danger, then there should be a push to change things in order to correct the issues and provide a better way of life for as many people as possible. The problem arises when progress is sought blindly and without the proper cost-benefit analysis to weigh the consequences of what is being proposed. Many times, over the years, societal change has been pushed for and even enacted under the guise of progress, only for the truth to later be revealed that certain wealthy, even outright evil interests were guiding the change and ensuring that the growth would only be felt by the ones who were already in power to begin with. The problem that arises is the classic issue of who decides what is the best course of action to take regarding the concept of progress. We have touched on this concept when we spoke about utopias a little bit, and that certainly highlights the dangers of pushing for progress at any cost. Ultimately, we can look at the financial backing of any group or movement to understand just who is making the decisions at issue. When it comes to the CFR, one financial dynasty stands out above all the other backers, although not without the shared interest factor being present throughout the group's major funders. The Rockefeller Foundation has contributed in many massive ways to this think tank, all the way up to and including David Rockefeller himself serving as a director of the organization. So how does this fact actually connect to the idea of an out-of-control progressivism? Well, because the Rockefellers were and continue to be a major proponent and ardent supporter of the concept of eugenics. Eugenics is an ancient idea where the goal is to select for the best qualities in humanity and make changes to the population in order for the desired outcomes to be achieved. The line of differentiation between this and the progressive political ideology is so easily crossed that the two have actually become intertwined over the last century or so. The eugenics movement of the late 19th and early 20th century took on forms that were deeply evil, and quite obviously so to most who observe the concept in retrospect. What began as a form of biological and scientific racism evolved into what would become the ethos of the Nazi Party, as well as other utopian regimes like Mao and Stalin, and the main driver of the systematic murder of tens of millions of people. In the 21st century, eugenics is alive and well, yet it's gone through some changes. What we now see is the melding of progressive ideals, utopian visionaries, and technological advancements converging and endeavoring to create an environment where the negative aspects of humanity can simply be edited away as if they are a software bug. Concepts like Neuralink, CRISPR, and gene therapeutics are just some of the many forms that this modern positive eugenics has taken, yet the underlying philosophy remains the same, and that is that human innovation can improve upon the flawed design of God. This is a very materialistic worldview, and it really does damage to the truth of reality and the beauty and wonder and really the unstoppable force of creation that God has designed. While many of these innovations do have positive and altruistic, even like morally right intentions, the idea of Neuralink being able to go into someone's brain and fix inherent issues with, say, vision or sound, like auditory sensory abilities, or even heal spinal injuries to where people are no longer bedridden, they can take care of themselves. This is a morally right thing. Yet, these things, the inherent underpinnings, set out on a slippery slope that winds up in the same catastrophe that the many attempts at utopia inevitably wind up in. I say all of this to try and spur on some kind of thought that focuses on the human cost. What is the end game of these big money and big technological interests? Why do they fund these various think tanks and projects and technological advancements? And why do they seek to gain and keep so much power and influence over the world in which we live? These are some questions that I hope to delve in a little bit more into the future. We're going to look at some more history of education, some of the societal philosophies that have existed throughout the 20th century that have led to where we are now in the mainstream media, and we'll also look at some more of the interconnected converging interests that exist in today's world. Until the next video, I hope that you all stay safe, I hope that you all check in on and be good to your loved ones, and I hope that you all stay diligent and vigilant with your minds on guard.